but the world of football is changing. We are breaking records all the time. More women certainly are participating in football at every level. More women working in the industry. Women are attending more men's and women's matches. There are more women at conferences like this. There was a time when I used to attend a conference like this and be pretty much the only one. So I think across Europe, certainly we're in a very sort of transformative period, I hope. Football, certainly in my experience, and I've been in the game since about 1992, so it's quite a while, is becoming a lot more professional. I don't think that's a coincidence with the number of women working in the game. And I think it's in part due to the fact that we're taking leadership roles in football. And that's what I want to explore today with this panel of extremely influential leaders. And we're going to talk about how they're changing the game and what else we think that we all need to do to change our sport for the better. Arianna, I'm going to start with you. You've been a pioneer, both as a player and working as a senior exec now. What was the point at which you realised you could have more than one career in football?
I don't think I woke up one day and was like, wow, I can do something else besides play football. I think that's like silly. But no, I always knew that I wanted to work in business, and especially business that I knew a few things about, which is football business. And I kind of guided my career to know that the day I hung up my cleats would be the day I'd put on a suit. And even during my career, I had a dual role at Paris Saint-Germain, where I was a player and working on the business side of the game. And I think more athletes should be guided in that direction. A lot of athletes are only shown that they should go into coaching or... No, actually, mostly it's just coaching. If you want to stay in sports after your career, you should become a coach. Coaching is a difficult job, and most of us shouldn't be doing it.
It's quite limiting.
Some of the ones that are coaching shouldn't be doing it either. But no, it's a calling, and I've never had that calling. I think coaches are teachers too, and they're special people, and that's not what I should be doing. And I knew that early on in my career, and not to point it out, but there's somebody else in this room who also realized he wasn't going to become a coach, and he's done great things in the business side of football, because football players can do a lot more, and clubs and organizations can actually take advantage of that resource to start training them and become the future leaders of the sport. So I'm going in a roundabout way of your question, but I didn't just wake up one day and decide that I should work in football. I knew that's where my path was going to go when I decided to hang up my boots.
I think it's interesting what you say about coaching, because I've always felt that it pushes people down a very narrow path, because there's a funnel and there are far more players than there are coaches. And I think it's a bit of a mistake to try and lead everybody down that coaching path and, as you say, not realise that there are other careers that they can have in football, because otherwise just coming out of that playing career is so challenging and so difficult for people.
And I mean, I'd be interested to know, with my fellow panelists, they're all women who work in sport. Did any of you want to become a coach, or did you coach at any point in your career?
No, it's way too stressful.
I studied to be a coach. I have a license from the Mexican Federation, Football Federation, but as a matter of fact, I didn't do it in order for me to become a coach. I did it in order for me to become a better journalist. So I did that for me to understand what is happening backstage and what it actually means to be coaching a team, because it's very easy to sit in the booth and say, oh, that guy is doing everything wrong, but you don't know how difficult that job actually is. So I do believe that for us, it is very important to just expand horizontally our knowledge, and part of that was why I studied to be a coach.
And it gives you more credibility, I think, right?
Oh yeah,
had
that was also important, because...
Like, what's your license? Because I'm a licensed coach.
Exactly, because you have many men, mostly saying, oh, you cannot talk about this because you never played the game. I did play. I didn't play professionally. I wasn't good. I wanted to be a tennis player. I didn't want to be a football player, but I'm a good journalist. So tell me what your licenses are, Mike.
Yeah. I worked at the Premier League for a long time, and primarily working in safety as well as fan engagement. And I realised there was definitely a perception of people who worked at the FA or at the Premier League that we lived in this sort of ivory tower in these offices and didn't have the experience that the people at the clubs had. So I spent a lot of time in like control rooms, because I just thought I need to be there and they need to see that I understand this. Because effectively I was speaking on behalf of a lot of the clubs, and you can't do that if you haven't sort of had that very specific experience, I think.
Exactly.
Danita, you've led the way in changing the WNBA in the past and now leading a soccer team. And we were chatting earlier, and I was just fascinated about the differences that you found and how different it is in football. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and just how different it is and how you lead your businesses?
Yeah,
I guess how you've led in NBA and then how you've led in
Absolutely.
DC United.
I mean, the depth of the football world is like the magnitude of this world is so big. And when I look at the WNBA, and it's not even to make us feel smaller in what we're doing, but when I look at this, it really is the world's game. And for us, when I was in the WNBA, there were so many other facets, right? Not only were you building a business, but when you are trying to fight for equality, trying to fight for change in so many different formats, it really does change the mission and some of how you work from a day-to-day perspective. One of the things we always fought was the narrative of not being a charity and being a business. And it was something that we always talked about, and I think you still see that now, and even in women's football, is just the point that these are businesses, and we don't need to look down upon or less than in that capacity. And I think when I switched over, obviously, with DC United and running the club in DC, it's just been a whole new world, right? Just opening up an opportunity, even as a woman in leadership, to really kind of push that message forward of what we can do to change a business and evolve it on multiple levels. And so it's been a wonderful challenge. The fandom is completely different than basketball, and that's probably been one of my biggest learning curves. And all of the the cups in every single league, and learning through each phase of that has definitely been a challenge, and taken a couple of good long nights to get up on my football world.
The emotion in football, I think, is something that really strikes people when they get into the business, and how that impacts your everyday lives if you're liaising with fans.
Can I ask you a question, though? Were you able to teach football anything from the WNBA?
Probably just slow down a little bit more compassion in some of the things that we do. I mean, you have to have that. And I think the other thing is, I think the world of football is such an interesting landscape right now in sports and things in general about how people can talk about different issues going on in the world. And so how we handled that with the WNBA, when you look at the summer before, if anybody probably paid attention to that in 2020, how those women stood up and kind of used their voices, how to actually do that in other sports. I think they set a good foundation for that, and they've done that for years.
Lina, you've had a similar experience, I think, in leading a football club that's an absolutely crucial part of people's lives. Like, you described it to me as being like the jewel in the crown for people. And I think the pressure of that that comes with that is immense, really, being at the centre of something like that. And now at the ECA, you're trying to use that experience, I think, to sort of lead the way in how we can improve clubs right across Europe. Can you tell us a bit about that, and what do you think are the changes that need to be made that you want to focus on?
I mean, starting from the pressure, running the daily business of a club like Olympiacos, the most successful Greek club, it's, I mean, the pressure is really high, but also productive, because, I mean, during the 4 years of my term there, we managed to win 4 leagues in a row, regularly participating in European competition, mainly Champions League, and also in Europa League, qualifying until round 16. And at the same time, building processes in order to develop players and manage to transfer them on better leagues, and trying not to compromise the club's performance on that. Yeah, the pressure was really high, and the visibility that these kind of jobs have, you know, are not like any other business. But at the same time, you know, along with this responsibility, I felt the responsibility that I needed to share my journey, and I mean, so far my journey, and try in a way to leverage in the industry, in this highly male nominated industry, in order to bring some cultural change. So I got the chance back in 2019 when ECA statutes were amended. To be appointed as a diversity representative. I'm not an expert on diversity. I'm just a female working in football. And I was trying just to use my experience in order to open more opportunities for women. Of course, it was in the beginning, it was quite challenging when I got appointed 3 months after it was the outbreak of the COVID and this whole disruption of the game, and then the European Super League thing, so things got a bit derailed in this sense, but a year ago our chairman, Mr. Nasser Al-Khelaifi, made us really to dream big, because he mentioned that diversity and inclusion is one of the 4 key strategic pillars of ECA, and this helped us to set a really visionary agenda in this sense. So I mean, in the beginning, we are all managers in a way, so we know that what's not get measured cannot be done. So we started an audit by an independent expert for the association, and this will be rolled out to our members to get some data where we fall short, where we stand in matters of diversity. And also we had all the ECA administration members staff members to get trained with a 6-month session discussing topics like unconscious bias, sexism in sport, and the impact of racism. And now we are in a really ambitious phase trying to propose some statutory changes that will be actually changing the governance model in a more, promoting more women's leadership. We are trying also to open our membership base, because ECA so far it was just a men's football club, and now we will have a new structure about women's football also. Okay, ECA, it's from Baku to Finland, from Ireland to Cyprus or whatever. The cultural differences are huge, and things cannot change overnight. But we are in the beginning of the journey, and we think that with solid steps, we can position these things, on the table.
Do you find this impatient sometime to go from where we are to where we want to get to, and people not understanding the steps that need to be taken? As you say, when you're working with federations, with clubs that are just so disparate, and at such different points in that journey.
Yeah, I think the impatience comes more from us, that we are experiencing how difficult this can be, this journey. But at the same time, the industry is so conservative. They are, executives, owners, they are impatient when it comes to results, and they can sack coaches from one week to another. But when it comes to really cultural change, this actually takes time. Takes time, and it's people like advocating this kind of stuff all the time in order to not set out, but to bring like a proposal and solution that can really change things.
Yeah, and Marion, you've had an interesting experience working on a report recently on some research, helping to push the agenda forward, and I'm fascinated by the stats that you have shared with us earlier. So do you want to talk us through a little bit of some of that? Explain about what the report has been and your experience of doing that research into media.
Well, I think it has to do with what is happening in this room right now. It has to do with the very little representation of women and very few participation of the men in that fact as well. We cannot hide the elephant in the room, ladies and gentlemen. This just happened a couple of minutes ago. I run an NGO, and we did a study over the last 2 years that analyzed around, 10,000 news stories. And we examined them, and 7% were about female athletes. So that had to do with Mexican media. We analyzed basically journals and digital media, and the representation does not have anything to do with reality. If you go out to the street, we're 52% of the population, yet in media we only represent 7%. Let's not talk about non-binary people or LGBTQ community, because that basically doesn't exist. So the thing about this is that the way in which we represent the world in media has to do with the way we interpret the world. So if we don't see this, this won't be happening, and we have been listening to this numerous times. But it also has to do with how we represent women and how we represent diversity. It doesn't only have to do with the quantitative aspect of the investigation, but also the qualitative fact. And the thing is that we see media and we read news stories that reinforce gender stereotypes. We talk about women in a certain way. We have panels that talk about us in a certain way and that do not reflect what we actually want to come across with. So I do believe that these results are alarming, they're worrisome, and yet again, we have all these good intentions, but very lousy executions. And what we need to see is a better execution. We need to see words put into actions. We need to stop thanking for the minimum, and we need to aspire for the maximum. And most people will not like that, because change is uncomfortable, because it's tiresome, because usually when I'm in the newsroom, I'm like, I'm the crazy lady talking about this, no? I'm always complaining, I'm always saying we should have better representation. But the thing is, I know I'm not crazy, and I will not be gaslit, because I know we need more Linas, we need more Danitas, we need more Ariannas, and we need you to be talking in media. We need to see you, and we need not only to see you in terms of what you think about women in the industry, I need to understand what your take on the industry is. And as a journalist, I need to be able to assess that, and whether I criticize your point of view or not, but I need to understand what is behind the fact of you being a woman. And what I also want to add is, we need to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to do with a woman or a man. It has to do with the values we put center front. Can we talk about more horizontal leadership? Because what I do see in the industry, sometimes it resembles a bit of the military. It's very vertical. You have one person making decisions, and the values that are important for that person maybe are not for the organization or for the industry any longer. So we need to understand that other concepts need to be center front.
How do we align that, I guess, that difference, as you say, and that cultural attitude and shift? What needs to change? What steps do you think can be taken?
Well, first of all, we need to be listened to. I mean, the fact of the matter is we cannot come across with many of our ideas because we have many people in leadership who tend to say, well, that's what they need. We're going to give them what they want. It's not charity, Mike. We need you to actually sit down. I'm sorry if there's anyone called Mike. It's just an example. I'm sorry to the Michaels in the room. But we need you to sit down and actually listen to the problematic. And that happens with many other situations. People with disabilities. It happens with the LGBTQ community. It happens with trans people. It happens with women. It happens with all of these situations that have to do also with race and many others. And we need to sit down and actually listen to the people who are going through this problematic and give them the opportunity to tell us where we need to be headed. But that requires a very big capacity to be humble, to sit down, and to also recognize that we're not where we want to be as an individual and as a collective.
But I think that could be interesting since you both run your clubs and organizations. Has anybody talked to you guys or asked you if it was different because your type of leadership is different from the status quo?
I hear it all the time. My staff actually tells me, they're like, I've never worked for somebody like you. I've never had the opportunity to be so open in the workplace and have a sense of vulnerability in the work that we do. So I actually hear it back from my staff and the conversations and the dialogues that we have internally. I mean, we push the needle. We go through things all the time. We're going through something right now, and we're pushing the needle on conversation. It's very uncomfortable, but we have to do it. And so I think one of the biggest things, and I have people that have been with our club for 10 plus years that when I came in have already been there, and they've been through multiple leaders. And there's a consistency in what they say they show up now more authentically in themselves because of the style in which we've shifted. And it doesn't mean we don't reach goals. It doesn't mean that we still don't, do what we need to do from a business side, but we try to create a place where you can show up as yourself in the best format. And so I do hear that. I hear it from our team, and I think even for our owners, it's something in the dialogues that we have back and forth in our conversations that I'm able to feed back up to them as well.
I'd rather be talking about that than Sergio Ramos' tattoos.
Right.
I mean, his tattoos are very interesting, but they're not newsworthy. This is newsworthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really interested in how you think you lead there. Were you conscious of doing things differently?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, I've worked, prior to this, I worked in basketball for 15 years, both in the NBA, WNBA, and I've been around men's sports, and predominantly, obviously now, I run a men's club, so it's a little bit different. I learned a long time ago that when you sit on the floor with everybody else and you kind of work your way through this industry, you hear all the conversations, and most of the conversations are about voices not being heard, or I wish they would tell us more or talk about things, communication, all of that. So by the time it was my turn, and listen, it's a double-edged sword sometimes, right? When you are that vulnerable and that transparent within your company, you take a lot of risk. Most people aren't willing to take the risk. And so I'm willing to take the risk because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, at least I know I did it the way that I felt was the best. And so that comes with challenging conversations. It comes with people pushing. But what's interesting about it, on the flip side that I really love, is that you watch them do it with one another. So they will have constructive conversations with one another because I have constructive conversations with them. And they want to start to reflect what they're seeing from a leadership aspect. So it's it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's something that from the day I stepped into that club was very intentional about, and work at it each and every day, even when I make mistakes. I'm not afraid to say I'm not perfect. I tell them all the time, I'm probably gonna mess up, so don't be mad, it's gonna happen. And they will too, right? But it's about giving that grace to build our business and our club to be the best thing possible. And we always talk about the communities we serve, and internally, if we are not reflective of the communities we're trying to serve, then why are we doing this? And why are we out here preaching what we're trying to preach? So I try to live by that.
I'm quite excited about the new generation of leaders that you'll be cultivating there, actually, how they will do things differently, because this is the issue, isn't it, that we all repeat the behaviour that we've experienced and what we've seen with our leaders.
So Wayne Rooney's going to go back to the Premier League and be like, no. Let me tell you guys how we do it at DC United, because we had the best, and she did this, this, and this, and you guys need to learn.
Yeah, and we're just going to raid all your staff, obviously, for everywhere else, because you're going to have trained them well in leadership. So I'm interested in the risks that the others of you might have taken, that issue about taking that risk in leading differently. Do you feel that you've done that, Arianna? Do you feel that you've,
it's a hard act to follow. Why'd you go to me?
Yeah. Well, any of you.
I don't run a whole club. I don't have people telling me that I'm changing the way they live and work and come. I think we've probably all taken risks, just like most people in this audience, male or female, have taken risks in your career and trying to step forward. And I think I'm really lucky that I'm not afraid to take risks, and I'm not afraid to speak out, even when I'm not supposed to. Yeah. And I think that's key, and probably most women on this stage have done that, and that's why they're able to be where they are. So I don't have an exact example of risk-taking for you, but I think sitting up here in front of everybody when we could fall off of these high stools would be a risk. Yeah,
yes, we were all slightly conscious of that. What difference does it make when, what happens in the room when we have female leaders to help make decisions, whether that's in a large organisation or a small? Do any of you have examples of where you've thought actually that real diversity of thought in the room has made a really key difference to a decision? Anything you've done differently?
If I'm allowed, for me, it's not differentiating whether it's female or male. It's just to have a fair representation, because like this, you have different perspectives, diversity of perspective, ideas, and experiences across the table, and this eventually nets better decision, improve performance, because we were speaking about risks, and after all, now it's quite clear that the more diverse a company is, the more outperform comparing to their peer companies, not only in football. So it's about trying to have this diverse environment in any possible situation.
I think though too, like seeing women in higher positions and being able to have a dialogue with them. A random example, there's actually somebody in this room that a few years ago I had a dialogue with because I really wanted to get into the business side of the game, retiring, but I'm still a woman and I want to be a mother also, and I want to do it all. And these aren't conversations that you can have with your male colleagues. They don't have to think about it. When do you have a baby? When do you not have a baby? Can I not work anymore if I do have a baby? Will people look at me different if I'm on stage with my big belly like this? And so having the women that have gone through that already, and you can have those conversations. We probably all have male mentors too, but they can't answer that for us. And so seeing women who have already done it is really inspiring, even if they're not currently sitting at our table at our personal job, but just seeing it happen is I like it. I don't know about you guys.
Absolutely. I mean, if I think about this, I'd have to anchor it with your previous question, which has to do with taking risks, because for you to become a person that is a reference for somebody else in those terms that Arianna is mentioning, you have to take a risk. Like in my case, I tried to step out of the traditional role of the hostess or the anchor or woman being in media. And that began with me having an opinion, because you might think this is funny, but the stats don't lie. We don't have women writing articles that have to do with opinion. They sign news, but they don't have an opinion in written media or in talking media. And I started commenting on games. And when I started commenting on football games, people actually liked it. When they didn't like me anymore was when I stepped out of my feminist closet, when I started talking about things that are uncomfortable, when I started pointing out things that happen in the industry, when I started an NGO and started mentioning this. Most people might not like what I say or how I say it, but I do believe it is important. And that is a big risk I have taken in a sexist country such as ours and in a sexist industry such as the football industry. And what has happened with that is that even though I might not want to have a baby, but women ask me, how are you planning to do this? That is not my decision. Why don't you want to have a baby? And then you go
that's a different discussion.
through a whole different discussion. No?
That's a different discussion.
But the thing that I want to say with this is they feel like they can talk to you about something. Yeah. And that has to do with taking risks. And we need to have more women being able to take risks and having others being there for them. And by others, I mean men in positions of power.
I'd add one thing to that is I think the fear in taking risk is typically we believe it's our only shot. And so a lot of women won't take the risk because they believe that it's their only shot. The same way a lot of men don't take the risk in business to do something differently because they believe it might, I don't know if they actually believe it, but it could be their only shot, right? So with that being said, we have to, I think one of the things we have to change our mentality on is knowing that we can come back. Like we can make a mistake and recover. And I know it sounds kind of odd because you see so many people fall, and especially in this world, how things happen so fast. But if that is what is destined for you, you will find your way back to it. And so I think we have to start being able to kind of take down those walls a little bit more and stop living in the fear of the unknown and make it known. And I think that will also help because it really starts to cap us in what we can actually do when we start, continuing to live in that own fear of that one time. This is that one time I finally got that one job or that one thing. And you won't risk anything because you're so afraid of losing it.
So if any of us take a big risk, we have a job at DC United?
We'll be working together and start our own business. We'll figure it out. So.
No, but one point that I would like to raise on that is, to take risk, you have to get to the opportunity to take the decision, whether you take the risk or not. Yeah. So I think that it's very crucial that we really create this kind of paths, that we give the opportunity equally to women, men, or other minority groups to get the opportunity. Because if they don't have the opportunity, then they may not take the risk. Or they
so
are
if
not
we open up the diversity pool
so to build
and
this
start to
pipeline,
spread,
because there is so much talent there that I'm coming back again to the same. Don't see male, female. It's talent there. So we need to find the way to give them the right opportunity to feel that they belong in this industry.
And is that actually, in the industry, is it about sort of finding that base of people that across the sector that you can work with? Because I think you're absolutely right about this issue about having one shot. I know of examples of women I work with in Premier League clubs who were allowed one mistake and that was it. And basically had to move into another part of the industry or completely out of the industry. Because I do think that people who've been in the industry longer, and perhaps a lot of men feel that they have a base of people that, I can mess up because people trust me, because I've got that base of people. And I think subconsciously, I was sort of building that base a lot in football, so that I felt that I could take some risks, because I had support across the sector. Because I was going to ask you all, actually, sort of what advice you would give. I know there are quite a few people at this conference who are starting out in the industry and finding their way and sort of forging that career. And my bit of advice would be to sort of create that base and make those friends and allies in the sector that you can learn from as well. But do any of you want to add to that?
I do think what you mentioned is very important. Like you need to have a support system, and you need to have people behind you. But the other thing is, and that has to do with risks. With us, it always feels like if you mess this up, you're closing the door for another one.
Yeah,
and we need to leave that behind, because it makes everything so much bigger, and you feel like this whole amount of responsibility on your shoulders. And it's like, if I mess up, I'm not messing up for all humankind, as I'm not messing up for all women. So can we just leave that on the side and try and conceptualize that? But in that sense, I would also tell to the ones in the room who are starting out and who might be afraid or who don't want to take a risk, we've all felt like that. I'm sorry, that might not be a consolation, but you're not alone, and you need to reach out to others because we tend to feel alone. It happens to me, and every time I go on stage and I speak to marvelous women such as yourselves, I'm like, okay, I'm not alone. So that is a very important thing because we tend to talk about imposter syndrome. It's not a syndrome on you, it's a syndrome on the environment. The environment is making you feel unworthy. The environment is making you feel like you don't belong. It doesn't have to do with you. It's a problem with the matrix, with the system. It's not you. And you really need to understand that for you to feel free and able to and enabled to take risks.
Yeah. I think it's earned too. Like it's earned over time. Like you don't walk in the door and just feel like I'm gonna go and do this or do that. You know, I think it is an earned thing that you have to earn over time. You earn respect. You add people to your circle, as you mentioned, that strengthen that opportunity, that you feel more comfortable in doing those things that may feel uncomfortable to you. But it's tough. Like as we're speaking about this, I can kind of make it sound simple, but it's not a simple thing. It takes a lot of work, and it's a daily practice and a mindset that you really have to get into. I remind myself daily, I probably overthink it way too much, but it is that. I still have my own fears, but I know I got to get up and go. I got to get up and try.
I would say too, my recommendation is, which is not easy and it's going out there, but make yourself big. Like if you're the only woman at the table, don't like try to take that little space, kind of push the guy over, like push the guy's arm off the seat. Like honestly, I get in a plane, no matter what, I put my arms, even if I'm super uncomfortable, on the armrest so that the guy sits next to me, he cannot take the armrest. Just like I'm sitting here and making space, and I think you have to make space for yourself, and then when my friend comes and she wants to share, I'm gonna push some guy and let her come sit next to me. And it sounds so silly, but it's something that I consciously do, and I'm bigger, so it helps a little bit. But make yourself known in the room. You already are known because you're sometimes the only one. Don't ever be like try to bring others with you, but also, okay, you know I'm here, so let me make sure you know I'm here.
I think that's great advice. Take your space and don't be afraid to ask questions and to make those allies and to introduce yourself to other people.
The only thing that I
industry.
could advise, if I can advise anybody, is that be yourself. I mean, I think I became a better manager when I admitted that I don't know everything. I'm not the smarter person in the room. So it's okay. And being a woman in this industry is even less intimidated, you know, like it's okay not to know everything, ask questions, explain to me like I'm a 2-year-old, it's fine. And, you know, at the same time, it's really important to build a system, you know, to all these women or professionals that at some point they will feel that there's something they are not doing well or they are overwhelmed or anything, to have some support from other figures that can really support him and help him to go further. I mean, the industry needs you, so you need to be there.
I think that's a great positive note to finish on. Thank you very much to everyone on the panel. Thank you.